Spoiler alert, spoiler alert. This is a video adaptation of the case of the Mystified Murderess from the 1980s board game, Sherlock Holmes, Consulting Detective, and will spoil the whodunit. So don't watch if you intend to play the game.
We join the Baker Street Irregulars at 221B Baker Street.
The Case of the Mystified Murderess, July 4th, 1888. We find Holmes just as Dr. Watson's note had described him. Listless, unresponsive, oblivious to all around him. He has not resorted to his solution as of yet, whispers Watson. My plan may keep him from it, indicating the newspaper clip in his hand. A tightrope walker at the Royal Italian Circus has fell to his death. Foul play is suspected. What do you think, Holmes? No answer. A series of burglaries. 6 over the period June 2nd to June 17th. And on the 2nd of July, a 7th has occurred at the house of Sir Sanford Leeds.
The society burglar strikes again.
The Cleopatra tiara was stolen, and as with the others, no signs of extensive search by the thief and only the one piece of jewelry involved. Victims elsewhere at the time. Here's a complete list of the particulars, Holmes, if you care to read it. Silence. A cabbie picked up a fare at its regular stand. The passenger spoke up when he realized that they were headed in the wrong direction, but got no answer. Oh my, the cabbie was dead, still sitting upright with a knife in his back. A policeman managed to halt the horse and bring the cab to a halt. Around the neck of the cabbie, they found a pouch containing 30 Roman coins. Denarii.
The fools! If they had allowed the horse to proceed, it would have led them to the scene of the crime. Let me see that.
Watson hands him the clipping and casts a self-satisfied smile in our direction. His enthusiasm restored, Holmes occupies himself with the newspaper clipping when the doorbell rang. Enters a tall, bespectacled young man, identifying himself as Gerald Locke.
I beg you for your help, Mr. Holmes. 3 days ago, Guy Clarendon was found murdered at Halliday's. It's preposterous, but Miss Frances Nolan has been charged and is being detained at the criminal court.
I was just about to bring the matter to your attention, Holmes, while Watson's waving another clipping from the newspaper.
I cannot believe she is capable of murder, even of such a scoundrel as Guy Clarendon.
Scoundrel? Asked Watson. I've only heard very good things about the young Clarendon. Scion of a wealthy family, an accomplished batsman for the West London Cricketers, a ranked fencer in international competition.
He was a bounder, very fond of cards and strong drink, and he associated with some rather low East End types. His father had all but disinherited him. I tried to tell Frances that he was only after her money, but to no avail.
Frances and Loretta Nolan, the surviving heirs of Sir Malcolm and Lady Nolan, were killed when an avowed anarchist, one Zagreb Jablinski, threw a bomb into their carriage, mistakenly thinking it carried the Duke of York. Loretta, age 5 at the time, was also in the carriage. Miraculously, she was unharmed. Yes, the gory details of the assassination, as well as those of the disposition of their considerable estate, were well documented in the tabloids.
Mr. Locke, you are the suitor for Miss Nolan's hand, are you not?
Yes, I am, sir.
Why was Miss Nolan charged with the murder?
Well, you see...
Locke hesitates. He seems very uncomfortable and removes his spectacles, wiping them clean as a cover for his distress. Finally, in a low, resigned voice, he answered.
She was discovered over the body with a pistol in her hand.
Holmes nods, takes up the clipping of the cabbie's death again, and turns a deaf ear to Locke, proclaiming Miss Nolan's innocence.
I'm sorry, Mr. Locke,
he says, finally cutting him off.
but I cannot personally take your case. Another very pressing matter has come to my attention.
He goes to retrieve his hat, adding,
You can rest assured, however, that I could not leave you in better hands.
and then he was gone.
Well...
Mr. Locke, sputters Watson, you must excuse... That is, as Holmes suggested, we will spare no pains to get at the truth on the matter. You have nothing to worry about.
I'm sure I don't,
says Locke, sounding rather unconvinced.
After some deliberation, the Baker Street irregulars decide to visit the scene of the crime, and we talk to the desk clerk at the Halliday Hotel because the manager was too upset to be of any help. Go figure.
A man, registering as Clarence Guy on the 29th of May, checks into a front room on the 3rd floor. 2 days later, he requests a move to Suite 205. During his stay, he receives 2 visitors. One, a large, intimidating man with a thick walrus moustache and a prominent scar down his cheek. The other, a striking, fashionably dressed woman with a laugh as distinctive as her appearance. As the day clerk recounts, the large man arrived on the 1st of June, the very day Mr. Guy moved rooms. He sat in the lobby, waiting, until Mr. Guy descended from his room. A brief, tense conversation ensued before they both left the hotel together. The large man was never seen again. On the morning of the 2nd of July, a seemingly unremarkable woman entered the hotel. She walked straight to the staircase, ignoring the front desk entirely. This unusual behavior caught the day clerk's attention, but he was detained by Mr. Ramsey, a long-term guest with a knack for complaining. Fast forward 30 seconds. A faint bang echoes through the hotel, followed by a woman's scream. The day clerk dashes to the 2nd floor, where a crowd of guests has gathered outside room 205. Inside, he finds Mr. Clarendon's body and the woman unconscious with a pistol in her hand. Upon reviving her, she appears utterly disoriented, with no recollection of where she is or what she's done. When she saw Clarendon's body, she gave out a cry and let go of her pistol as if it were red hot. I took her to a nearby vacant room and had the police summoned. At our request, the clerk calls the bellboy to show us the suite. On our way to the room, we discover that the lad has just shifted to day duty after working nights. And inquiring further, we learned that the front doors are locked at 10 p.m. So after that, any guest or visitors must be let in by the night staff. Clarendon, leading a most exemplary life, was always in his room. Before 10 p.m, the constable on guard lets us into the 2-room suite and oversees our tour. The sitting room walls are papered in a subdued floral pattern. The ceiling is covered with yellow plaster. The constable indicates the entryway of the bedroom as the place where the body was found. There is only a spot or 2 of blood on the carpet. A large stain had apparently been made by the spilled contents of 2 wine glasses lying nearby, one shattered in the centre of the sitting room. Some 15 feet away are small flecks of yellow plaster. A search of the sitting room yields nothing much in the way of personal items. In the top desk drawer, however, we find a folded bank statement from Cox's Bank. Withdrawals and deposits. Withdrawals June 1st, £5,000. Deposits were May 30th, £5,000. June 12th, £500. June 16th, £1,000. June 18th, £500. We wandered into the bedroom, and in the closet there are but 2 shirts and 3 pairs of shoes. One of them, a pair of canvas fencing shoes, dyed black. In the dresser, there is the usual assortment of underwear and shirts. Loosely tossed in the top of the drawer was a black wool sweater and a pair of black trousers. Not much of a view, comments Wiggins, looking out of the open bedroom window. The brick wall of the building across the alley is dreary indeed. Even the ivy vines which wind up the trellis and cover the back wall of the Halliday Hotel are dusty and cheerless. So what happened in room 205? Who was the large man with the scar? What was the relationship between Mr. Clarendon and the woman with the distinct laugh? And what about the woman found in the room? A murderer or a pawn in a larger game? These questions hang heavy in the air, a complex web of mysteries waiting to be untangled. For now, the day clerk can only recount the events.
Suspect list: Guy Clarendon, victim; Miss Frances Nolan, charged with crime; Miss Loretta Nolan, Fran's sister and heir to Nolan fortune; suspect; Mr. Gerald Locke, Fran's boyfriend; suspect; the guy with the scar, for whom we have no name as of yet; suspect. Info gathered at the hotel: Guy Clarendon alias Clarence Guy. Spilled wine, 2 glasses, 1 broke. Black pants, shirt and shoes. Bank deposits match with news of robberies. It's requested to be moved to 2nd floor. Ivy trellis from back window. It's looking like Clarendon was burglarizing and someone found out.
turns out Miss Loretta Nolan lives not but 2 blocks from the Halliday Hotel. Exiting our cab, and the first thing we see at her door, a man dressed as if he stepped from the pages of the Tales of Arabian Nights, curved scimitar and all. As we approach, he bars our entrance to her home. Only when it is established that we are not tradesmen collecting for goods or services are we allowed to pass. We enter the parlour to find Miss Loretta reclining on large silk pillows clad in a costume similar to that of her servants. To add to the motif, long swatches of brightly coloured sheer material were draped about the room. By appearances, we might have entered a pasha's tent. Enter and be recognised, she commanded, lifting her head from a hookah pipe on which she was puffing. It must have been our look of total disbelief, which caused her to break out with peals of deep, unrestrained laughter. When we do not respond, her laughter abruptly dies, and her mouth pauses in a pout.
Oh, you do not wish to play? Very well.
She is suddenly on
Come,
her feet
Randall.
and flying around the room, whisking away the cloth, plopping down in a chair. She tells us to state our business. You do not seem at all upset by Mr. Clarendon's death, and your sister's arrest. She takes a long moment, staring off into nothingness.
Guy was fun to be with. Francis is an innocent amongst lions.
Before we can ask another question, she rises and calls for her butler.
Randall, I believe I'll be going out for the evening. Get the carriage in order.
As she sweeps out of the room, leaving us standing there, all alone to let ourselves out.
Our interview with Edward Hall is short-lived, as he knows little of the Clarendon case, but with his connections he arranges an interview with Miss Frances Nolan, confined in a drab holding cell at the criminal court. She is the picture of misery. Her eyes hold a great deal of confusion and disbelief at her present situation.
I don't remember anything except seeing Guy's body across the room and a pistol in my hand. I screamed and I must have fainted. I didn't even know he was at the Halliday Hotel, and I've never been there before. And why would I shoot him? We loved each other.
Wiggins goes to calm her down. Now, let's take it one step at a time. What is the last thing you remember before being at the hotel?
Going to bed the night before. On Sunday evenings, Dr. Trevelyan dines with me at my home. My sister Loretta is under his care, and these weekly meetings he tells of her progress. Well, the doctor and I have become friends over the years. Dr. Trevelyan left at 10 o'clock. At 11 my maid Grace prepared a cup of hot cocoa for me, and then read a book, in bed, for a short while, before going to sleep.
How long have you known Guy Clarendon?
I first met him at the estate of Cornelius Oldwine back in March. There was a party of some sort. My sister climbed a 20-foot fountain and dived in. And I had to fetch her home, and she caught pneumonia. Guy was at the estate.
And he immediately began paying court to you?
No. In fact, he didn't seem to notice me. I was quite surprised some weeks later when he called. It was a lovely afternoon, May 10th. He apologized for his impertinence at calling without an appointment and asked permission to call again. We began seeing a good deal of each other, went for carriage rides, picnic lunches. He declared his love for me and asked my hand in marriage. I couldn't have killed him. I loved him.
How do you explain your presence at the Halliday Hotel?
I can't. It's just like the other 2 times.
You've had memory loss before?
Yes, twice in the past month. The first time I found myself sitting on a bench in Hyde Park. It was late in the afternoon, and the last thing I remember was having lunch with my sister. The second time occurred a few days later. That morning I had met with my solicitor, Hiram Davenport. That was the last thing I remember until I woke up again at the Liverpool Street station. I consulted my doctor, Dr. Mason, and he was quite puzzled. He said I needed to get more rest.
Where did you acquire the pistol?
I've never seen it before, even though the police assured me that it was mine.
One last question. What is your relationship to Gerald Locke?
Jerry is an old, dear friend. I'm afraid we've had a falling out of late. He said some very unkind words about Guy.
Edward Hall catches up to us on our way out. He tells us that he has asked Wilfred Robarts to take Miss Nolan's case.
He's young, but has already gained quite a reputation. Mark my words, he will be knighted someday.
Gerald Locke seems to be mistaken about Francis. Or is he lying? I don't think so. We were left thinking Clarendon just moved in on his girl. And although that raised his suspect factor a bunch, we were leaning towards Loretta that did it.
Info gathered from meetings with Loretta and Francis Nolan. Loretta is more than a little eccentric. Francis meets with Dr. Trevelyan, who is caring for Loretta. Francis has been having memory loss issues that have just recently started happening.
Dr. Percy Trevelyan's office is on Regency Street, and within walking distance of both the Halliday Hotel and Miss Loretta's place. He greets us with a smile as we enter. Dr. Trevelyan is a man of considerable size, and everything about him, his movement and gestures, are quite ponderous. His eyes, however, are quick and lively and seem to penetrate into one's inner core. It's ever so slightly disturbing. Sitting behind his desk, fiddling with his pocket watch, he asks,
"How may I be of assistance?"
"We understand that you dined with Francis Nolan on the evening of July 1st.
"Yes, that is correct. We dine every Sunday. Her sister Loretta has been under my care for some 10 years, first at the Mesmer Braid Institute, and then in private practice. I meet with her every Sunday to keep her informed of Loretta's progress. What began as a purely clinical exercise has developed into a pleasant evening between friends. Let me say that it is difficult to believe that Miss Francis committed this deed. She has a quiet, unassuming personality. An act of such direct confrontation would not be at all in keeping with her character."
Are she and her sister close?
They lead very different and separate lives. Miss Francis lives a quiet life, while Miss Loretta's is wild and flamboyant. Francis stays at home. Loretta never misses a party. Their laughs do well to illustrate their differences. Francis is timid, no more than a titter. Loretta's laugh is resounding and totally uninhibited. For her part, Francis loves and cares for her sister, as a parent would a child. Miss Loretta, well, she often seeks refuge with her sister, and loves her as much as she is capable of.
We thank the good doctor and head back to 221B, Baker Street.
And then we decide to visit Sir Francis Clarendon.
Sir Clarendon is a stern old man deeply disappointed in his only son.
He was a wastrel and a swindler. Only a month or so ago, I gave him £5,000 and told him it was the last he'd see of my money. I hoped the shock would bring the young man around, make him realize that he had to settle down and carve out a life for himself. Enough of this madness. The gambling, out all hours of the night, with that wild woman. He was breaking his poor mother's heart.
Wild woman? Who do you mean?
That Nolan girl.
Francis?
No, that sister of hers, Loretta.
Do you know with whom your son gambled? Who might have wanted him wearing a toe tag?
No, I'm sorry. He told us nothing, and only came around when he needed money. And since I told him there would be no more I hadn't seen him. Just breaking his mother's heart, he was. Don't waste your tears on him, Gertie. He wasn't worth it.
So saying, his own eyes began to tear over. We quietly take our leave, and the butler shows us out.
Maybe I can help. Master Guy was a wild one, but he wasn't all bad. About 5 weeks ago, I noticed a man hanging about. A formidable-looking character. He had a scar down the side of his face and was dressed rather carelessly, which is what attracted my attention. He just did not belong, if you know what I mean.
Did he approach the home, or had you seen him with the young Clarendon?
Neither. He just walked up and down the street for most of the evening. I was certain, however, that he had a special interest in the house. Late that night, or rather very early the next morning, for I remember hearing the hall clock chime 3 times, I heard a clatter in the house and came to investigate. I'm a very light sleeper and I was on my guard anyway, because of the man lurking about. In any case, it was Master Guy. He was in a terrible state. He was all battered and bruised and there was a fresh cut on his forehead. I asked him, point blank, who had done this? He didn't answer directly, just told me that I should forget about it, and not to mention it to anyone.
Thanks, this may be a big help.
From here we decide to visit Scotland Yard.
Why even trouble yourself with this one?
You believe Francis Nolan to be guilty?
Guilty as a cat would swallow a canary.
And on what do you base that brilliant deduction?
Look, Francis Nolan claims not to have known that Clarendon was residing at Halliday's. Yet she proceeded directly to his room where she shot the bloke. She claims not to have owned a gun. Yet the gun found in her hand was purchased at Esgoff and the receipt had her name on it. No, that little lady will never see the light of day again.
Esgoff's is one of the few gun shops in the city. Hoping they may be able to shed some light on who really bought the gun, we take a stroll to pay them a visit.
Do you remember a woman who came in recently and purchased a Derringer?
Oh, matter of fact, I do, sir. We don't get women in here very often, especially not alone. And I particularly remember that one because she was so pretty and, she looked like she really knew how to have a good time, if you'll pardon the expression.
Do you remember her name?
I should say I do. She repeated it twice whilst I was filling out the order form. Seems like it was very important to her that I get her name right. Let me see, it was, Francis, no, Les, well, it was Francis something.
London Times. Society Burglar News Update.
An elusive and so far successful burglar comedy known as the Society Burglar has gotten away with jewels valued at £14,000 by the 7 victims to date. Speculation continues as to the identity of the burglar, who seemed to be acquainted with the various and sometimes ingenious hiding places of his victims' jewels. The other striking aspects of the modus operandi are the taking of only one select piece each time and the occurrence of all thefts when the victims are not at home. After a series of high-profile burglaries perpetrating on some of London's oldest and titled families, Scotland Yard has announced that the increased police presence in the city's best neighbourhoods has brought an end to the reign of the so-called Society Burglar. Speculation is rampant as to the identity of the suspect, but with no criminal in custody and no evidence, nothing is known.
From here we decide to investigate a few of the burglaries. All the news had us curious.
We arrived home sometime after midnight, and and as my wife was putting away her finery, she noticed the bracelet was missing from her jewelry box, and we summoned the police immediately.
The servants were questioned?
Oh, they've all been with us for a number of years, and I haven't the slightest suspicion about them. But yes, the police did question them thoroughly. All were in bed asleep by the time we arrived home, and none heard anything untoward.
And nothing else was taken?
Surprisingly not.
Yet you are positive that the bracelet has not simply been misplaced?
No, my wife actually put it on while she was preparing for the evening, and then she decided against it. I saw her put it back in the box.
Where does she keep the box?
In her dressing table, there's a special compartment in the side of it. The box fits in rather neatly.
My husband, God rest his soul, gave me that necklace for our 50th wedding anniversary. And woe betide the blighter that took it, I say.
I can certainly understand your consternation, madam. May I assume that you were out the evening it was taken?
Oh, yes, the house was completely empty. Sybil, my housekeeper, and I were attending the masked charity ball at St. Mary's for the benefit of unwed mothers. It wouldn't surprise me if that scoundrel was responsible in that direction as well. Society burglar, indeed. He's of the lower classes, mark my words.
Do you keep your jewels locked up?
Oh, I keep them in a very secret place. A box made to look like a copy of Great Expectations on the bookshelf amidst the other books. Hiram, my late husband, thought of that, but the thief went right to it.
The tiara was a terribly valuable piece of jewelry, and it meant so much to my wife. She has been under a doctor's care since the theft. In fact, just yesterday she took a room at the hospital.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is she prone to bouts of nervousness?
Perhaps lately it seems so. She was absolutely undone when young Clarendon poured champagne down the borders of her gown at Richmond's party. Come to think of it, that was the last time she wore her tiara. She was so proud of it. And several of the ladies at that party admired it openly.
Where did Lady Leeds keep the tiara when she wasn't wearing it?
In the bottom drawer of her bureau, where she kept some of her more frilly undergarments.
Were there any signs of a search? Drawers left open, that sort of thing?
No, and that's what strikes me as so peculiar. It's as if the burglar knew right where to look.
At this point, we were kind of stuck. Until the kind Dr. Watson suggested we should maybe pay a visit to the innkeeper, Porky Shinwell.
Sure, I remember Clarendon. He and his lady friend used to stop in here from time to time. Usually on their way to Kilgore's gaming parlor or coming back from it. Rumor has it, Clarendon was into Kilgore for a sizable sum.
Do you happen to know how much?
£7,000 was the figure I heard. Got to the point Kilgore wouldn't allow him in the door. Clarendon made a big fuss till Gus Bullock stepped in. Clarendon backed down pretty quick. Don't blame him none. Nobody in their right mind would want to mess with the likes of Gus.
Do you think Bullock was involved in the murder?
Nothing you could tell me about that bloke would surprise me. Anyways, Kilgore makes it clear to Clarendon that he wants his money. Then, a month or so later, Clarendon comes in all smiles. He and Kilgore getting on like chums. Figure Clarendon must have paid him back. Then, Calvin Leach steps into the picture.
Now, who's Calvin Leach?
Leach deals in what you might call stolen property. Square dealer, too. Give you 1/2 the value of the article.
What does Leach have to do with Clarendon and Kilgore?
Usually nothing at all. But there it is. Leach, Kilgore, and Clarendon meeting late at night just as thick as thieves. The meetings continued on right up to, well, the night before Clarendon's death. Very interesting. Now, we've been standing here jawing, and I don't recall hearing anybody order nothing. What'll it be, mate?
We find Gus Bullock just as he is leaving. As we arrive at his residence.
Who are you and what do you want?
Dr. John Watson, sir. I wondered if you might be kind enough to answer a few questions.
About what?
Guy Clarendon.
That welching little weasel, what about him?
He's been murdered.
Ah! I'd say he got what he deserved. And if you don't clear out of here in 2 seconds, so will you.
Oh, quite. Ta-ta!
At this point, we were out of relevant places to go. So we went to see the judge at criminal court to make a case against Loretta Nolan as the true murderess of Mr. Guy Clarendon, of which we suspect was the society burglar. Guy was cut off by his father for gambling and wasting money, as well as owing so much money that he wound up taking up theft to support his unhealthy habits. Our thought was that it seemed obvious that Loretta had bought the gun and forged Frances's name and somehow framed her for it. Probably jealous of Guy and Frances spending so much time together, though we could not figure out how or when. We still were pretty certain she did it.
Hear ye, hear ye. The Queen's Court now stands in order. I understand you've been looking into the murder of Guy Clarendon.
That is correct, Your Honor.
Would you be so kind as to tell the court who killed Mr. Clarendon?
We believe the act was committed by Miss Loretta Nolan.
I see. And what was Loretta Nolan's motive for killing Mr. Clarendon?
Probably jealous of Guy and Frances spending so much time together.
How was Frances Nolan induced to go to Halliday's?
Possibly drugged, not really sure.
Who was the society burglar?
Guy Clarendon, Your Honor.
And lastly, who is Calvin Leach?
He is who Mr. Clarendon sold the stolen goods to. He was a fence.
Well, you've done an admirable job in resolving this mystery. I'd say you're on a par with just about any other armchair detective out there. I would suggest, however, that you rethink this case again, thereby improving your sleuthing skills.
And here, we have Holmes's solution.
Well, Watson, we should be very pleased with ourselves on this one.
Yes, indeed, Holmes.
2 cases solved for Scotland Yard, though I doubt that Lestrade will consider himself in our debt.
2?
Yes, indeed. First, the society burglar. Clarendon was £7,000 in debt to the gambler Kilgore. Unfortunately, he was in his father's bad graces and he was flat broke.
Do you suppose Kilgore sent Bullock around to rough Clarendon up?
Good deduction, Watson, you're learning. That's why he moved into Halliday's, to escape Gus Bullock.
And to pay off his debts, he took to burglary.
Right you are. He acquired a black sweater, trousers, and a pair of black canvas shoes so as not to be seen or heard in the dead of night. He chose victims of his own class, whose social comings and goings he knew well, and whose homes he'd visited often.
I still don't understand why, after he'd settled in at Halliday's, he changed rooms.
Elementary, my dear Watson. To be at the back of the hotel with a vine-covered trellis conveniently leading in and out of his bedroom window.
Quite so. Positively clever of you.
May I continue?
Oh, please do.
On the 1st of June, Bullock tracked Clarendon down and confronted him in the lobby. Clarendon paid him the £5,000 that was given to him by his father.
But he still owed Kilgore £2,000. And that was the same evening the society burglar struck for the first time.
So pleased you've been paying attention, Watson. Soon after that, Clarendon, Kilgore, and Calvin Leach, a known trafficker in stolen goods, were seen together. Notice, if you will, that 1/2 the value of the first 3 society burglaries is equal to £2,000. half the value being the price normally paid by Calvin Leach for stolen goods. Notice also that this same amount is equal to the balance of Clarendon's debt to Kilgore.
Fascinating. So with his new vocation, Clarendon now had an easy source of income.
Quite so, as his succeeding bank transactions evidence. On the day after each of the next 3 burglaries, Clarendon made deposits. Everything went along swimmingly, and by June 30th, his debt was paid.
But the tiara was stolen July 1st.
Yes, Watson. Apparently, young Clarendon thought he'd found himself a new vocation. He might have lasted longer at it if he'd chosen something else to steal.
Whatever do you mean, Holmes?
Loretta Nolan's delusion.
If she took it, how did she manage? No one saw her enter or leave.
She came and went the same way Clarendon did, via the trellis. She was armed with a derringer purchased at Escorts in her sister's name. Clarendon returned from his night's work and poured 2 glasses of wine in celebration. That's when Loretta Nolan shot him and took the tiara.
How wicked of her.
Not nearly as wicked as what she did next.
What?
She went to her sister Frances's home and hypnotized her. She then proceeded to instruct her to go to Clarendon's room with the derringer and fire it into the ceiling.
Incriminate her own sister? But why?
If we could determine that precisely, we could start our own institute.
Sick mind, no doubt. But tell me, Holmes, how did Clarendon know the precise locations of each of his victims' jewels?
Excellent question, Watson. Although there is no clear-cut evidence for this, I can only assume that Loretta Nolan must have been in on it too. The only way Clarendon could have known the locations of the jewels was if the victims themselves had told him where to look. None of them recalls having told anyone, but in fact they did tell someone.
Who?
Loretta Nolan. She managed to hypnotize each of the ladies whose jewels were stolen and got them to reveal the precise locations of the family treasures.
And left them with no memory of having done so.
Precisely.
Astounding, Holmes.
Elementary, my dear Watson.
I gotta say thanks to anyone who made it all the way through this one. It really was done just for the love of the memory of the game. We had so much fun playing this game back in the day. As always, please comment, like, and subscribe. God bless, and peace be with you.